And this is question time. And a big welcome to you at home, to our audience here from the SNP, Tasmina Ahmed Sheikh, one of the party's 56 new members of Parliament tonight. It comes from Brian Spalding, please. Brian Spalding.
Is the Chancellor right to sell RBS shares at a £7 billion loss to the taxpayer? Is
the Chancellor right to sell, as announced yesterday evening, the RBS shares that we own at £7 billion?
On that point, and Brian, in response to your question, I think we need to bring this right back to the people who are most affected by what happened in the banking crisis, which are ordinary hard-working people of this country, nurses, teachers, people who have faced so much austerity off the back of major banking mistakes. And I think there needs to be a sense of justice that everybody feels at the end of all of this. And we're looking at shares that were purchased at £5 that will be sold on at £3.61 at the moment, and I think we should be very careful about doing this over a period of time so we absolutely maximise the return and people feel there's been some benefit for the pain that they've had to bear over this number of years. And I should add that Chancellors have form on this. You will remember the last time we were actually in surplus was when Gordon Brown was Chancellor of the Exchequer, and that's when he sold off all of our gold at rock bottom price. So let's make sure we don't let that happen again and get some justice for the people of this country.
Audrey Dickinson, please. Audrey Dickinson.
Should 16 and 17-year-olds be allowed to vote in the EU referendum?
The upcoming EU election, the great row about who should be allowed to vote. Well, you have your say, because in Scotland 16 and 17-year-olds had the vote on the referendum.
Indeed, and Audrey, a resounding yes in answer to your question. And I think 16 and 17-year-olds deserve much more respect than they're getting at this moment, and I'll tell you why. There's already been a rash generalisation that we expect 16 and 17-year-olds are going to vote the same way. We don't know how they're going to vote in this EU referendum, and they have demonstrated in the independence referendum in Scotland quite beautifully an understanding of the process, participation in the process, and in fact they could teach a number of people with greater years and experience how to do this properly. And I have to say, Douglas, I mean, if we're prepared to send people, young people to the front line and indeed to take their taxes, why should they not indeed have a say in what is basically about their future? And as far as the Labour Party's position is concerned, we've been absolutely clear, and those of you who are watching the BBC Parliament the other day will have seen we put in place an amendment, the SNP, saying that 16 and 17-year-olds should have the vote, amongst other things, and Labour did not vote with us on that. So I'm very much in favour of young people exercising their democratic right. I think we have much to learn from the young people of this country, and I very much look forward to working with them in the Yes campaign.
OK. Question. I want to take a question. I'd like him to explain it from Daniel McCroyd before we leave this Europe subject, which we'll come back to frequently. Your question, sir.
Is David Cameron using dirty tactics to try and get his way in the EU referendum?
And I'm puzzled about what dirty tactics you were thinking of.
So, where to start?
Where do you start, you say?
Trying to get rid of PERDA, perhaps, has been talked about recently, which would put taxpayers' money into funding a certain side of the debate. There's the alleged threat to his own MPs. If you vote a certain way, then you'll be fired.
His cabinet ministers.
Yeah.
They'll be kicked out of the cabinet if they say against it. Yeah.
The alleged one. Yeah.
Yeah.
You
think really dirty tactics. Tasmina, your turn, and then I come to you two up there.
Thank you, David. Just on the point of having a fair referendum, I think we need to get the franchise correct, and I think we shouldn't have politicians choosing an electorate, but an electorate choosing politicians. And on that point, and the reason I make it is that EU nationals are being excluded from voting in this referendum, and I don't believe they should. There are certain EU nationals, by virtue of being Commonwealth members, who are able to vote in this election referendum, but we find ourselves in the quite frankly ridiculous position in Scotland where we have an elected member of the Scottish Parliament, Christian Allard, who represents people in the north east of Scotland, who is able to vote in the Scottish referendum, who is not able to vote in the European referendum. And this is something that absolutely has to be fixed, because again, European nationals working here, paying tax, contributing to the economy, should have a say in this referendum.
They vote in the general election?
Particularly, David. Well, you're not using it. If I may just answer your point, you're not using the general election franchise because you're entitling Lords to vote, and some of them, 6 at least, for elected convicts. That also has to be fixed.
North and South. Dan Hopper, your question, please, if you would.
Will the Northern Powerhouse benefit the North East, or just draw talent and finance away?
And when you say this Northern Powerhouse, is a mysterious expression that suddenly crept in. As I understand, it means Manchester, Sheffield, Leeds and Liverpool. Is that what you understand by it?
Yes.
Or does it include Gateshead and Newcastle and Sunderland? No.
No.
No. So the Northern Powerhouse, which they're giving, will it benefit just the North? Will it benefit the North East, or just suck talent away? Tasmina, you start on this one.
I am very interested in working with the North East of England consensually to move forward an agenda that benefits the people of Scotland and indeed the North of England, where we share so much common cause. I mean, we certainly didn't vote for a Tory government in Scotland, and I'm sure many of you sitting here tonight didn't either. What we have to look at is who is getting the best deal out of where we currently find ourselves.
Scotland rather than the North East,
we have a London-centric government, David. I mean, there was in 2013 there was a report carried out that detailed, in terms of transport infrastructure alone, the spend per head in London was £2,600, and in the North East of England, £5 per head. So there's quite clearly some readjustment that needs to take place, and I am, of course, in favour of devolution, so people can take some of the future into their own hands and indeed get a better deal for themselves, because that's not what you're getting at the moment. And I'm sure you will understand why Scotland voted the way we did in this election, because we want to have increased powers to make decisions for ourselves, because decisions that are made in London in the main currently are simply made to benefit London and the South East of England, and that has to change, because there are people suffering on a daily basis as a result of some of the legislation that's coming out of Westminster.
This one from Megan Fennick, please. Megan Fennick.
Why are we becoming a surveillance state akin to George Orwell's novel 1984?
Why are we becoming a surveillance state? And this is in the light of what was reported today. The government's watchdog on anti-terror measures said that the laws presently in place are obscure, undemocratic and unnecessary, which is a pretty severe indictment. At the back. Yes.
Can the MPs tell us if the Snoopers Charter stays as it is, are they going to back it in its current state?
Tasmina, you're in the House of Commons now.
Yeah. Well, we have to look at legislation in this respect. At the moment, we've just had a report which has been warmly welcomed, I think, across the board. Even Amnesty as well have welcomed the report. And I want to echo some of Chris's comments and add that I think it's important that if you want to seek warrants, you should require to make a case to do so. And that is why I think it's appropriate that judges should make decisions in this respect. Our approach and response to these things should always be measured. A blanket approach may not always be appropriate. Sometimes things will have to be looked at on a case-by-case basis.
But what about the Snoopers Charter, which was about the internet information being kept for a period and accessible to governments? That's what you're referring to, isn't it? Yes.
I think, there's a discussion to be had on this, and indeed on the back of the Anderson recommendations, and it's something that I intend to look at over a period of time before we have to come to a decision about it. But my own personal view is I think we have to be careful how we proceed, bearing in mind that public safety, of course, is of paramount importance, but we also must respect people's right to privacy too, and not take things too far when it's not necessary to do so.
The man in blue, I want to build on this. I want to build on this with a question from Sophie Williamson, please, which ties into why the cause of the surveillance recommendations in the first place. Yes.
When will we stop ISIS fascism?
When will we stop ISIS fascism? Tasmina.
Sophie, I would say, as a Muslim also, in answer to your question, I think fundamentally the way we deal with it is through education. Those of us who practice Islam in the way it's supposed to be practiced will know that the first words spoken to the angel Gabriel from God, as we believe it, were read. And that's for a reason, because to understand a religion you need to be able to understand it and read it for yourself, not take it in a way that someone else explains to you what something is saying. And it's a question that I asked in Parliament the other day when we were having questions on international development in terms of how we spend our budget. And let's not be spending that on military action when we can possibly spend it on educating particularly women and young girls in many countries around the world to how we should be going forward globally as global citizens, all as pacifists and humanitarians, as patrons of humanity indeed. And I absolutely fundamentally believe that the only way we're going to tackle the issues that face the world in terms of any kind of terrorism, to educate people across the board that this is not the way forward. That's where the money should be spent.
Now, question time, extra time. But here in Gateshead, my thanks to our panel, to our audience, and from Sage, Gateshead, until next Thursday. Good night.
More political debate coming right up here on BBC One with This Week next.